Okay, so let's jump right in. We're going to go on a little journey into our own heads to solve a pretty big mystery. Where do our feelings actually come from? It seems like a simple question, but the answer has been, well, surprisingly hard to pin down.
I mean, we've all heard the story, right? It's that classic pop psych idea that your right brain is the creative one, the artist, the emotional part of you.
And of course, that means your left brain must be the cold, hard, calculating machine. The logical one that does all the math. It's a nice, simple story.
But what if I told you it's just not true? The real way your brain divides up emotions has nothing to do with being emotional versus being logical. It's actually way more interesting and, honestly, a lot more useful.
So to get to this new understanding, we've got to look at some of the old ideas, the theories that, for decades, kind of sent scientists down the wrong path. Think of them as the first few suspects in a detective story.
First, there was this really simple idea. The right side of the brain just handles all emotions. Done. Then, things got a little more nuanced with the valence model, which said, okay, negative feelings are on the right, positive ones are on the left. Then came the approach avoidance model, which tweaked that, suggesting the split was really about moving towards something or away from it. And finally, you had the emotion type model, which tried to sort them by basic emotions versus social ones. They all seemed to make some sense, but they were all missing the same huge piece of the puzzle.
And here it is. This is the big problem. The researchers behind this new map pointed out that all those old theories were lumping two totally different things together: seeing an emotion on someone else's face and actually feeling that emotion inside yourself. And it turns out your brain handles those two jobs in completely different ways.
So, let's look at the one emotion that just breaks all the old models: anger. Now, according to the popular valence theory, anger is negative, right? So it should light up the right side of the brain. But study after study shows the complete opposite. When you actually feel angry, it's the left side of your brain that fires up. Why? Because anger is an approach emotion. It gets you ready to act, to move forward, to deal with something. That one single contradiction proved that we needed a whole new map.
So, if all the old maps are wrong, what's the new one look like? This is where we get to the big idea, the breakthrough that changes everything. It's not about positive versus negative. It's about feeling versus function.
And this is it, the feeling-function model. The core idea here is that the brain sorts emotions based on their job. What are they for? Is an emotion there to give you information about your internal world, or is it there to get you ready to act on the external world?
Let's break that down because it's so cool. On one side, in the right hemisphere, you have the feeling-based emotions. Their entire purpose is inner awareness. They're tuned into your body's signals. That's a process called interoception, basically giving you a status report on how you're doing inside. Then, on the other side, in the left hemisphere, you've got the function-based emotions. Their whole job is about goal-oriented action. They're all about performance, control, and getting you ready to engage with the world.
Okay, so this is where it gets really satisfying. What happens when we take this new model and apply it to the 8 basic emotions that scientists have identified? Well, suddenly all the puzzle pieces just click into place.
Take a look at this. This is the new map, and it is so elegant. All 8 basic emotions are sorted perfectly into 2 camps. You've got your feeling emotions on one side and your function emotions on the other. All of a sudden, there's this beautiful symmetry that the old messy models just never had. Let's look at this a little closer. In the right brain, the feeling side, we've got sadness, fear, anticipation, and acceptance. Now notice how each one has a perfect functional opposite over in the left brain. Happiness is the opposite of sadness. Anger is the opposite of fear. Surprise is the opposite of anticipation, and disgust is the opposite of acceptance. This finally explains why anger is in the left brain. It's the action you take when faced with a threat, while fear is the feeling of being threatened. It just makes sense.
So, let's zoom in on the right brain's toolkit for a second. Sadness? That's not just a mood. It's your brain literally sensing your internal body state, things like slower circulation or muscle fatigue. Fear? That's your primal threat detection system run by the right amygdala for a crazy fast, almost gut-level response. Anticipation? That's your right insula reading your body's own internal cues to create that "I've got a feeling about this" sensation. And acceptance? That's tied to our deep-seated need for social connection, all handled by the right hemisphere's social wiring.
So what about the left brain's action-oriented toolkit? Well, happiness isn't just a pleasant feeling. It's tied to achieving goals and rewards, firing up the dopamine systems on the left side. We already talked about anger being the ultimate approach emotion, getting you ready to act.
Surprise is basically a rapid, "What was that?" response that uses the left brain's language centers to figure out the meaning of what just happened. And disgust? That's a protective function, using the left insula to make you physically and mentally reject things that could be bad for you.
Okay, so we've got this much cleaner, much more elegant map of our emotional brain. But so what? Why does this actually matter in our real lives? What's the big takeaway?
Well, here's the most important part. We can finally throw out that old busted idea of an emotional right brain and a logical left brain. It was never about that. It's about your brain having two completely different but equally important emotional toolkits that it uses to help you get through life.
Think of it like this. The emotions in your right brain, the feeling emotions, they're your internal dashboard. They're just data. They're telling you what's going on inside. But the emotions in your left brain, the function emotions, those are the action commands. They're directives, preparing you to do something. One side gathers the intelligence, the other side launches the mission.
And really, that leaves us with one last big question to think about. If you stop labeling emotions as good or bad and instead you start asking, what is this emotion's purpose? Is it trying to give me data or is it trying to get me to act? How does that change everything? How does that change the way you respond to what you're feeling?